They thought you were harmless, soft, predictable, someone they could walk over and you'd still return with open arms. They treated your kindness like a weakness, never realizing it was simply a mask one you wore to make life easier. But masks have a way of slipping off when people push too far, and they pushed until silence started to feel sharper than any blade. They believed hurting you would break you, not transform you. They assumed you would crumble, cry, beg for clarity, or cling to their excuses. Instead, you went quiet. You went cold. You went still in that eerie way people do when they're done being wounded and start being awakened. That's when the shift happened, the birth of the version they thought you'd never dare to become. They underestimated your ability to detach. They swore you were too emotional, too forgiving, too tender to ever walk away without a second glance. But they forgot one thing. Even the softest heart knows how to freeze when handled with carelessness. And when you froze, you didn't just become distant, you became untouchable. They didn't expect your silence to be their punishment. They were prepared for arguments, drama, tears, or explosions. What they weren't prepared for was the deadly calm, the kind that comes right before someone closes a door forever. Your silence wasn't empty. It was a declaration of power, a message sharper than anger could ever be. They always counted on your empathy, thinking you'd never learn how to shut off your emotions. They relied on your softness, thinking you'd always choose love over logic. But betrayal has a way of rearranging priorities. It turns warmth into ice. It turns hope into caution. And it turns the sweetest soul into something dangerously strategic. They thought breaking your heart would break your spirit. Instead, it cracked open a version of you that no longer cares for explanations, a version that chooses peace over people, a version that lets go without guilt, a version that burns bridges with elegance instead of rage. This is the villain arc they wrote for you. They just didn't expect you to step into it with style. They underestimated your intelligence. They thought you were oblivious, naive, easy to manipulate. They didn't know you were observing everything, the patterns, the lies, the inconsistencies. You didn't react because you were taking notes. And when you finally walked away, you didn't leave clueless. You left with clarity, sharper than knives. They thought your boundaries were negotiable. They didn't realize they were walking deeper into a minefield every time they crossed a line. Then one day, something inside you snapped, not in anger, but in realization. You finally understood that people only treat you how you allow them to. And so you stopped allowing. They thought you were too soft to deliver consequences. But you weren't avoiding confrontation, you were calculating. You were letting them build the rope they'd eventually hang themselves with. And when you pulled back entirely, they called you cold, cruel, heartless. But that wasn't cruelty. That was closure. They underestimated your ability to heal in silence. They assumed your silence meant pain, when it really meant preparation. They thought you were hiding because you were scared, but you were hiding because you were sharpening. And when you emerged, you didn't come back as the wounded version, you came back as the upgraded one. They never imagined you'd detach so swiftly. They believed they were unforgettable, irreplaceable, essential. Instead, they became irrelevant the moment you stopped giving them access to your inner world. You shut the gates, and the coldness they feel now isn't spite, it's justice. They believed you'd always give them another chance. They didn't expect you to walk away without hesitation, without tears, without a backward glance. They thought you'd fall apart, but you simply fell out of love. That's what scares them, how easily you replaced your pain with purpose. They misread your patience for weakness. They didn't know patience was simply your restraint. They didn't know your silence held back storms. They didn't know how much power you kept hidden behind that calm expression. When someone patient finally snaps, the aftermath is never gentle. They thought you'd always save them. They never thought you'd save yourself first. But when someone tries to drown you, survival becomes selfish. You chose yourself, and that decision turned you into a force they can no longer manipulate. They didn't expect the softness in you to flip like a switch. They never imagined your warmth could turn into indifference. They didn't think you had the capacity to disconnect emotionally, but you learned to. And once you mastered that, nothing they say can ever melt the winter you built around your soul. They assumed your loyalty was blind. They didn't know it was conditional. They thought you'd stay no matter how badly they treated you. But you have a limit, and they found it. Now they call you heartless because they finally feel what you used to feel. They never expected you to stop explaining yourself. The moment you stopped defending your character, their manipulation fell apart. You didn't argue. You didn't correct their lies. You simply walked away, letting your absence speak the truth they tried to distort. They thought losing you would inconvenience you. Instead, it liberated you. You're colder now, not because you want revenge, but because you want peace, and peace requires distance from those who thrive on chaos. They underestimated how far you'd go to protect your energy. They didn't think you'd shut them out completely. They thought you'd leave the door cracked open, but you didn't. You closed it, locked it, deadbolted it, and built another house somewhere they can't reach. They didn't expect your standards to rise the moment they disappointed you. They thought you'd still accept the bare minimum, but instead, they taught you exactly what you deserved by showing you what you would no longer tolerate. They didn't expect the coldness in your voice when they came back. They weren't ready for the calmness, the indifference, the distance. That wasn't bitterness, it was closure wearing a crown. They thought you'd break, but you reinvented. They thought you'd cry, but you calculated. They thought you'd chase, but you vanished. Every expectation they had of you died the day you realized the power of walking away. They underestimated the villain in you because they only ever saw your love, not your limits. They forgot that the same heart capable of deep affection is also capable of permanent silence when betrayed. And once you went cold, nothing and no one could warm you back up. They thought they were teaching you a lesson by mistreating you. But all they did was unlock a version of you who no longer tolerates disrespect, inconsistency, or ignorance. That version is colder, sharper, quieter, and far more dangerous than they ever imagined. They created their own villain, not because you wanted revenge, but because they forced you into evolution. And now they tremble, not because you turned cold, but because they finally realized you were always capable of this transformation. They just never thought you'd actually choose it. They assumed your transformation was temporary, a phase, a reaction, a moment of weakness dressed as strength. But the longer you stayed silent, the more they realized this was permanent. This wasn't a mask you put on, this was the person you always had the potential to become. A version built from scars instead of softness, shaped by truth instead of hope. They thought they could return whenever they wanted, and you would still be there waiting, hurting, wanting closure or another chance. But when they tried to revisit the role they once held in your life, they discovered the door wasn't locked. It was gone. The entire entrance had been rebuilt, sealed, erased. There was no path back to you, just the echo of their own choices. They never imagined you'd evolve without their guidance, their approval, their validation. They truly believed they were essential to your growth, blind to the fact that their betrayal became the very fire that forged the strongest parts of you. You didn't grow in their presence, you grew in their absence. And that stings more than anything. They underestimated your ability to disappear without leaving a trace. You didn't give a speech. You didn't warn them. You didn't ask for justice. You simply left. And the silence you left behind became louder than any argument ever could. That silence became their reminder of your strength, of their loss, of the villain they forced into existence. They expected you to crumble into pieces they could eventually pick up, but you rebuilt yourself into something they no longer recognize, something they can't reach, can't influence, can't manipulate. And the more you rise, the more they suffocate in the consequences of their own actions. They didn't think your heart could ever reject them. They thought your loyalty meant blindness, not choice. But when you realized they only valued the version of you they could step on, you killed that version. The new you has no interest in saving people who set you on fire. Their ego didn't just crack, it collapsed the moment they realized the truth. You were never desperate for them. Not then, not now, not ever. They built their confidence on the illusion that you needed their presence to breathe, and when that illusion died, so did the version of themselves they felt safe inside. They always assumed your silence meant longing, your patience meant hope, your kindness meant attachment. They never considered that you were quiet because you were already detached, already observing them from a distance they were too self-absorbed to notice. Their ego fed off the fantasy that you'd chase them, that you'd break first, that you'd crumble the moment they withdrew their attention. Instead, you stood there unfazed, untouched, unmoved, and that's when the cracks in their pride became fractures. They thought they were irreplaceable, a rare treasure you were lucky to have. But the moment they realized you weren't begging, weren't pleading, weren't even thinking about running after them, they felt something unfamiliar: weakness. You didn't give them a scene. You didn't break down. You didn't demand answers. You simply stopped caring, and that was a level of power they weren't built to handle. Your indifference became the storm that tore their persona apart. Their ego had been inflated by every person who treated them as a prize, and they expected you to respond the same way. But you didn't. You walked away like someone closing a book they'd already memorized, and the silence that followed stabbed deeper than any words could. It wasn't heartbreak that scared them, it was your stability. It was your ability to breathe without their validation, to sleep without their presence, to rise without their support. Every part of them screamed for attention, and you didn't even glance back. They couldn't understand how you moved on so smoothly, how you smiled without hesitation, how your eyes never dimmed, how your energy didn't collapse but actually grew sharper, colder, stronger. They expected a ruin, but witnessed a rebirth instead. Their ego scraped the floor when they saw you thriving, when they realized that losing you wasn't a tragedy for you, but a liberation. You were lighter without them, freer without their chaos, clearer without their noise. You didn't create a rivalry, you didn't compete, you didn't seek revenge. You simply healed quietly, powerfully. And nothing destroys someone more than watching the person they tried to break glow in a way they never could. What crushed them wasn't your distance, it was your lack of reaction. They expected tears, but you gave them composure. They expected confusion, but you gave them clarity. They expected fear, but you gave them a calm so steady it felt like an insult. Your confidence became the dagger they never saw coming. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the soft, dangerous kind that comes from knowing your worth isn't tied to anyone's presence. They realized they could leave, stay, return, disappear, and none of it would shake you. They spent so long believing they were the highlight of your story, but you treated them like a chapter important at the time, yes, but not unforgettable. The moment they saw that, their pride fell apart like glass under a hammer. You didn't need closure from them. You didn't need apologies. You didn't need explanations. That terrified them, because people who are desperate cling to loose ends. But you burned the whole rope and kept walking. Their ego wasn't ready for someone who loved without dependence, who cared without obsession, who could walk away without collapsing. They weren't used to strength like that. They weren't accustomed to losing control so effortlessly. The truth struck them harder than any fight ever could. You were only ever loyal, never trapped. Only ever present, never dependent. Only ever giving, never sacrificing yourself. And the moment you stopped giving, everything they took for granted disappeared. They thought you were naive, but you were simply patient. They thought you were attached, but you were simply kind. They thought you were weak, but you were simply considerate. Once those layers fell, all they saw was someone they couldn't manipulate. Their ego screamed when they saw your happiness didn't shrink without them, it expanded. You didn't dim. You didn't stumble. You didn't go quiet. You lit up. and that light exposed how small they were in the grand scheme of your life. They always thought they were the exception, the one person you'd break your rules for, the one soul you'd cling to. But you showed them something dangerous. Nobody gets that privilege unless they deserve it. And they didn't. Your silence toward them turned into indifference, and your indifference turned into peace. Watching you evolve without their influence fractured the illusion they hid behind the belief that you needed them to feel complete. They begged for reactions, even if they were negative. They wanted emotion, conflict, chaos, anything that proved they still mattered. But you offered none. You starved their ego, and it withered like something dying without oxygen. Every attempt they made to provoke you fell flat. You didn't rise to the bait. You didn't lower yourself to their level. You didn't even acknowledge their little games. And that lack of control made them unravel more and more. Your energy shifted. You became unbothered, detached, almost unreachable. And instead of feeling triumphant, they felt irrelevant. You didn't treat them poorly. You treated them like they no longer existed, and that was far worse. Their ego shattered when they realized something they never expected. You didn't hate them. You didn't love them. You simply didn't care anymore. And indifference is the sharpest blade a person can ever face. They used to take pride in the idea that you'd never find another them. But the real wound came when they saw how easily you could forget them, how your world didn't pause, how your heart didn't collapse. What destroyed them was knowing they weren't necessary to your happiness. They weren't the source of your strength. They weren't the center of your universe. They were a moment, not a milestone. A lesson, not a legacy. And when the truth finally settled into their bones, they felt something they'd never experienced before. Smallness, powerless, insignificant. All because you showed them the one thing their ego couldn't survive. They needed you. You never needed them. What truly broke them was understanding that your detachment wasn't an act, it was evolution. You weren't pretending to be fine. You were genuinely better without them. Lighter without their weight. Stronger without their chaos. And that reality squeezed their ego until it cracked like porcelain. They kept telling themselves you'd eventually miss them, that life would force you to remember their importance. But life didn't. Days passed, weeks passed, and you didn't stumble, didn't falter, didn't go searching. Your silence became a mirror, showing them exactly how replaceable they were. They replayed old memories like a movie, desperately trying to spot the moment you stopped needing them. But they never understood that independence wasn't something you gained after them, it was something you always had. You simply stopped hiding it to make them comfortable. Your growth exposed their stagnation. While you matured emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they stayed stuck in circles, repeating the same patterns, expecting the same reactions. And when you refused to participate in their loops, they mistook it for cruelty, but it was simply maturity. You no longer gave them the attention their ego demanded. You stopped responding with passion, stopped defending yourself, stopped explaining. You placed your peace above their pride, and that alone felt like betrayal to someone who relied on your validation to feel whole. The more you thrived, the more their resentment grew. They couldn't wrap their mind around the fact that someone they thought they controlled was suddenly beyond their reach. It felt like losing a battle they didn't even know was happening. They once believed they could return any time, that your heart was a revolving door made just for them. But when they approached again and found that door locked sealed shut, they realized just how severe the consequences of underestimating you truly were. Your progress created a silence that suffocated them. They couldn't brag about you. They couldn't access you. They couldn't predict you. They couldn't influence you. You became a version of yourself they could no longer interpret, and nothing bruises an ego deeper than being shut out of a story they thought they controlled. They watched from afar as you shifted from someone who cared deeply to someone who chooses carefully. as someone who once offered softness now carried a quiet, calculated strength that came from lessons they taught you through pain. Every time they tried to convince themselves you still cared, they ran into the same truth. You were not waiting. You weren't hoping. You weren't hurting. You were expanding. And expansion is the loudest kind of goodbye. They tried to convince themselves that you were the one who lost something valuable, but every aspect of your life contradicted that lie. Your glow-up made their ego crumble. Your confidence dismantled their delusions. Your happiness rewrote the ending they expected. They never imagined the day you'd look at them with neutrality instead of affection. And that neutrality, it became their punishment. Because nothing hurts a self-centered person more than realizing they don't matter anymore, not even as an enemy. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't plead for understanding. Instead, you gave them something far more dangerous than anger: silence. The kind of silence that forces a person to face the weight of their own actions without the distraction of your reaction. A silence that said everything you never needed to. They expected shouting, chaos, drama, something loud enough to justify what they did to you, but you didn't give them that satisfaction. You left them to choke on their assumptions, their guilt, their confusion. And that's when they realized the version of you they were dealing with wasn't the one they used to manipulate. Your silence didn't mean weakness. It meant calculation. It meant rebirth. It meant the death of your old self and the arrival of someone they were never prepared to face. A version of you forged through pain, sharpened through understanding, and perfected through distance. People fear the quiet ones, not because they lack emotion, but because they no longer waste it. You stopped bleeding for people who never knew how to heal. Instead, you stitched yourself together in the dark, alone, and became the kind of presence that demands respect without ever asking. Your silence became a mirror, a reflection of the chaos they created. And when they looked into it, they hated what they saw. Not you, themselves. Because for the first time, they couldn't hide behind your forgiveness or your explanations. You walked away with a stillness that shook their world. No dramatic exit, no final monologue, no last chance for closure. Just quiet steps, and a door that closed so softly it echoed in their mind like a sentence they could never erase. The villain they created wasn't born from rage, it was born from clarity. You finally saw everything for what it truly was. And in that realization, something inside you shifted permanently. You weren't their toy, their backup plan, or their emotional punching bag anymore. You learned that arguments are invitations to stay entangled in someone else's chaos. But silence? Silence is a declaration that you've outgrown the entire battlefield. And that scares people more than any scream ever could. Your silence dismantled their ego piece by piece. They wanted you reactive. They needed you emotional. They depended on the old version of you, the one who cared enough to explain, justify, defend. But that person died the second you understood your worth. One day they'll admit it to themselves, if not to anyone else, that the moment you stopped arguing was the moment they lost all control. Because silence is power, and you wielded it like a blade sharpened by betrayal. You didn't walk away as a victim. You walked away as someone who finally embraced the power of detachment. You didn't crumble. You didn't break. You evolved. And evolution always terrifies those who remain stagnant. They couldn't process how someone they thought they had figured out suddenly became unreadable. How you became untouched by their games. How your silence felt heavier than every conversation you ever had with them. In your quietness, you built an empire. You rebuilt your mind, your confidence, your identity. And while they were stuck wondering why you weren't reacting, you were busy becoming someone they would never have access to again. Your silence was discipline. It showed growth. It showed maturity. It It showed danger, not the kind that harms others, but the kind that protects your peace with ruthless devotion. They noticed your absence like a wound, not because they loved you deeply, but because they lost the attention, validation, and loyalty you gave so effortlessly. Losing you wasn't painful. Realizing they'd never get that version of you again was. The villain arc wasn't about becoming heartless, it was about becoming selective. It was about choosing yourself over people who chose their ego over you. And nothing screams reborn louder than walking away without looking back. Your silence turned into a legend in their mind. They replayed every moment, every conversation, every sign they ignored. They analyzed you the way people study an unsolved mystery, because that's exactly what you became. The beautiful thing is, you didn't change to spite them. You changed because you finally valued yourself enough to stop tolerating what broke you. And that transformation carried a power that words could never deliver. Your silence left them suspended in uncertainty. And uncertainty is torture for people who crave control. They can't twist your words if you refuse to speak. They can't manipulate your emotions if you refuse to reveal them. Every day they wonder if you think about them. Every day the silence answers for you. And the truth is simple. Your silence wasn't revenge, it was closure. The kind you gave yourself when they failed to provide any. Your rebirth wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. It was deliberate. It was unstoppable. You didn't return fire, you extinguished the connection entirely. And in doing so, you rose from the ashes of their betrayal with a calm that terrified them. They thought they could predict your reactions forever. They thought they knew exactly what to expect. But silence, your silence, was a plot twist they were never prepared for. It changed the entire story. You didn't argue. You didn't justify. You didn't fight for a place in someone else's chaos. You simply reclaimed your throne, not with noise, but with presence. A presence rebuilt, refined, and reborn. Your silence became the boundary they never thought you'd enforce. They were used to you bending, adjusting, compromising your own comfort just to keep the peace. But when you finally embraced stillness, it drew a line so sharp it cut through every illusion they had about their hold on you. And that cut was clean, no mess, no drama, no lingering threads. They couldn't believe the calmness you carried. It wasn't forced. It wasn't cold for the sake of being cold. It was the calmness of someone who finally walked out of the storm. You weren't trying to prove a point. You were simply done entertaining chaos disguised as connection. And that is a type of power they never expected you to possess. When they reached out, hoping to trigger a reaction, you offered the same silence that freed you. They tried guilt, manipulation, nostalgia, anything to break the barrier you built. But silence doesn't crack under pressure. Silence becomes stronger when tested. And every attempt they made only proved one thing. You had grown far beyond their reach. Your silence forced them to sit with every wrong decision they made. You didn't remind them. You didn't expose them. You didn't retaliate. You let their conscience do the work. And a guilty mind can be far more brutal than any revenge you could have planned. The most shocking part for them? You didn't look back. Not once. You didn't check on them, didn't stalk their page, didn't ask mutual friends how they were doing. Nothing. Your silence wasn't just directed at them, it was also directed at every old version of yourself that once begged for scraps of effort. They never thought you'd reach a point where peace mattered more than people. They always assumed they were your priority. They always assumed you'd come running back after every storm. But this time you didn't return, not because you hated them, but because you finally loved yourself enough to walk away for good. What they fear the most now is the truth. You're happier without them. They sense it, they feel it. Your silence carries a kind of freedom they can't understand. You stopped explaining yourself and started living for yourself, and nothing threatens insecure people more than someone who no longer needs them. Your silence became a transformation, a rebirth. A transition from being emotionally available to being emotionally untouchable. You became careful with your access, selective with your energy, ruthless with your peace. And they're left staring at the doorway of your life, realizing it's permanently locked now. They replay every moment because they want to know the exact second you detached. They want to know how you went from pouring your heart out to offering nothing but quiet distance. But the truth is, your silence wasn't sudden, it was the final result of thousands of moments they ignored. They wanted you loud so they could pretend you were the problem. But you stayed quiet, and now they have to face the reality of their own actions without anyone to blame. The silence exposed everything they tried to bury. It was the light shining on every flaw they once hid behind your forgiveness. Your silence became your revenge, not out of malice, but out of evolution. You didn't need to destroy them. They destroyed themselves through the choices they made when they thought you'd always be there. Your silence simply revealed the consequences. Now they see you rising in ways they never imagined. Stronger, sharper, emotionally upgraded. Your silence created a distance so vast they can't bridge it with apologies, guilt trips, or half-hearted attempts. You didn't shut them out, they lost their place. And the more you stayed silent, the more they realized how much you used to give, how much you used to care, how deeply you once showed up for them. Your silence highlighted your value, something they never appreciated until it vanished completely. They thought they were strategic. They thought they were 10 steps ahead. They thought they were smart enough to manipulate you, twist you, and use you like some disposable pawn in their little ego-driven game. What they didn't know was that you saw every move coming before they even made it. They thought they were playing you, but the whole time, you were reading them like an open book. They tried to provoke you, thinking you'd react, thinking you'd fall apart, thinking you'd break down exactly how they expected. But when you stayed calm, stayed sharp, stayed unshaken, they didn't know what to do. It terrified them because you weren't reacting, not because you were weak, but because you already knew where their game would end. They wanted to confuse you, to make you question yourself, to make you doubt your reality. But instead, you watched them expose their own character without lifting a single finger. The funny thing is, you didn't even have to play them. Their own intentions betrayed them so loudly they practically played themselves. They thought they were using you for attention, validation, affection, whatever they needed to feed their ego. But in the end, all they did was reveal how predictable they were. You didn't fall for their act. You let it run long enough to understand exactly who you were dealing with. And once you understood, it was over for them. They're mad now because they swear you outsmarted them. But the truth is, you never stooped to manipulation. You just stopped participating. And nothing frustrates a manipulator more than losing control to someone who simply stopped giving them access. When they set the trap, they expected you to walk right in. What they didn't expect was that you saw the trap, walked around it, and let them fall into it themselves. The silence, the distance, the calm composure, that's what destroyed them, because it made them realize you were 10 times smarter than the version of you they built in their head. Now they're replaying everything, trying to figure out where they miscalculated. They thought you were naive. They thought you were blind. They thought you couldn't possibly see through their inconsistent actions. But you were watching, analyzing, learning, storing every detail for the moment you finally decided to let them drown in their own consequences. They hate that you didn't confront them. They hate that you didn't cry or argue. They hate that you didn't give them the dramatic scene they were hoping for. Because that means you knew exactly what they were doing and you simply refused to let it touch you. The real reason they're mad is because you beat them at a game they created. You mastered a battlefield you never even wanted to fight on. And you did it with elegance, silence, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. That's what stings the most. They underestimated you. And now they're paying the price. They can't stand that you stayed emotionally grounded while they were busy acting, lying, and pretending. They were performing. You were observing. They were plotting. You were preparing. They were playing. You were winning. It drives them insane knowing you predicted their patterns before they even showed them. That's why they're angry now, because they thought they could blind you with charm or guilt, but you saw the red flags the moment they walked into your life pretending to care. When you finally walked away, you didn't need to explain anything. You didn't need closure. You didn't need validation. You simply walked, and the door closed on them like a final chapter they never wanted to end. That's when they realized the whole time they thought they were manipulating you, you were quietly building your exit. The silence you left behind exposed everything about them, every inconsistency, every lie, every hidden intention, and now they're scrambling to rewrite the story so they don't look like the villain. But the truth is written in their own actions, and your calm detachment only highlights it more. They thought they'd leave you hurt, broken, confused. Instead, you left them humiliated, powerless, and angry at themselves. Because losing you wasn't part of their script. They planned the game, but they couldn't handle the ending. Their ego can't accept that they never had the upper hand. They can't accept that you were already emotionally ahead of them. They can't accept that you were the one in control the whole time, simply choosing silence over chaos. They're furious because they swear you manipulated them, but what they call manipulation is actually your strength, your intuition, your ability to understand intentions without being told. They didn't get played, you just stopped allowing them to play you. The more distance you created, the more they realized just how little power they actually had. That's the part that cuts them the most. Not losing you, but realizing they never really had you to begin with. Your presence was a privilege they mishandled. Now they want to blame you for everything, for walking away, for not fighting, for being too calm, too composed, too unbothered. But deep down they know they're only angry because they played themselves trying to play you. They're embarrassed by how predictable they acted. They're offended you didn't fall into their emotional traps. They're insulted that you denied them the chaos they thrive on. When they wanted control, you gave them indifference. Nothing burns them more than that. Their pride is shattered because you turned out to be exactly what they feared. Someone who cannot be manipulated, broken, or controlled. Someone who sees through the mask. Someone who doesn't chase. When you walked away, they lost their ability to control the narrative. Now they're stuck with the truth. They weren't the mastermind, they were the clown juggling their own insecurities while thinking they were fooling you. What they hate more than losing you is realizing you were always 10 steps ahead. They hate that you protected yourself quietly. They hate that you didn't fall apart. They hate that you didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing you hurt. And the reason they're furious now? Because in trying to break you, they broke their own illusion. They wanted to play you. And instead, they exposed themselves completely. Your strength, your silence, your intuition, those were your weapons. You didn't fight their way. You didn't manipulate back. You simply let them collapse under the weight of their own behavior. And that is what truly played them. Now they sit with the realization. The game ended the moment you understood your worth. And from that moment on, every move they made only pushed them deeper into a loss they orchestrated themselves. They're furious because they finally understand that you didn't outplay them with tricks or manipulation, you outplayed them with clarity. You saw through the fog they created, and instead of stumbling, you stepped back and let them drown in it. That's what terrifies them. The realization that they were the only ones confused in a game they designed. They keep asking themselves how you walked away so effortlessly, how you cut the cord without trembling, how you moved on without panic or hesitation. They wanted you emotionally tangled, emotionally trapped. But when the moment came, you chose peace so smoothly it looked rehearsed. They never expected that. They thought you were too attached, too soft, too trusting. They were wrong. Every day now they replay the moments where they thought they had the upper hand. They cringe at their own arrogance. They hate the memory of you staying calm while they were busy plotting. They hate that your silence back then wasn't weakness, it was strategy. It was foresight. It was the quiet rise of someone who knew exactly how the story would end. They wanted you to chase, to beg, to question yourself, but instead you leveled up. You evolved. You became someone they can't predict, can't influence, can't control. That transformation alone is enough to shatter everything they believed about themselves. Because if they couldn't break someone they assumed was easy to break, what does that say about their power? Now they blame you for being cold, heartless, changed. But deep down they know they created that version of you. They sculpted your evolution through their disrespect. They pushed you into your strength. They forced you to awaken the part of you that refuses to accept crumbs. And now that this upgraded version stands before them, they're terrified. Their anger now is really grief over losing the version of you they could take advantage of. Grief over losing their influence. Grief over realizing you outgrew the battlefield they tried to trap you in. They're grieving, and their ego won't let them admit it, so instead they act mad. But you can see the truth behind their bitterness. They try to convince themselves they didn't care, but their constant obsession, their constant analyzing, their constant need to